Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Reginald Lampkin, VP Manager with the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology, and I'll be your host today for today's session as part of our Mastering the State Contracting Game webinar series with the Leveraging Diversity in Technology Procurement Initiative. We have a question or information on how to become BP certified, and you would check in with the cei.illinois.gov and look up becoming BP certified, and there you will be able to get all the information on how to be certified. Over the past two sessions, we've explored how vendors can compete through invitations for bid and informal small purchase opportunities. Today, we begin the next phase of the series, a three-part deep dive into requests for proposals, or RFPs. RFPs are often where the most complex and high-valued contracting opportunities live, but they're also where many vendors struggle. The structure can be dense, the requirements detailed, and the evaluation process isn't always obvious at first glance. That's why today's session is called Reading Between the Lines. Our goal is to help you understand how RFPs are organized, what agencies are really looking for when they evaluate proposals, and how to identify key compliance requirements before you begin writing your response. During this session, we'll walk through the basic structure of an RFP, how evaluation criteria and scoring work, key compliance requirements vendors need to watch for, and how to track RFP opportunities and updates in BidBuy. Understanding how to interpret an RFP correctly is the first step towards developing a strong proposal, and it lays the foundation for the next two sessions in the series, where we'll focus on building and submitting competitive proposals. Before we begin, I'm pleased to introduce the man, the myth, the legend, Chris Brinkmeyer, Agency Procurement Officer at the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology. Chris brings extensive experience in state procurement and works closely with agencies and vendors to ensure the procurement process remains transparent, compliant, and effective. Today, he'll guide us through how to interpret and navigate RFPs from the state's perspective. Chris, we're looking forward to your insights. Please take it away.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. As you touched on, this is our first part of our three-part RFP series. The goal of this series is to give you a dive into exactly what to do to make sure that you are responsive and you submit us as a good proposal. As Reggie said, part one, we're going to dive into the documents found on the solicitation, required submission documents, and more importantly, reading the RFP. What's involved in each section, what's important for you to take a deep dive and look at, and to make sure that you cover in your proposals. Once we get to part two, we'll cover best practices on how to submit that proposal, scope of works. I'll do a preview of the Department of Innovation and Technology scoring tool and how that works on the backside that you guys don't normally see. And then part three, we'll be rolling out our vendor debriefing process. I know there's been some questions about vendor debriefs. So we'll be rolling that process out. We'll roll out how to respond to various pricing methods, bid buy versus price sheets. So we're going to go in order. We're going to treat this like we are doing an RFP, responding to an RFP ourselves, just like we did in the last two series. The IFB and the small purchase. We're going to start over from scratch in case someone's only watching this one. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to take it away. So just like the previous series, we'll be working in the bid buy train environment. So all this is fictional data, fictional solicitations, but it gives us a chance to go in and look at everything from scratch every step of the way. So let's start at step one. How do you find a proposal that's been put out for solicitation. So there's a couple ways, right? So one, you may get the email notifications directly from BidBuy for every NIGP code that you're registered in. I've mentioned it previously. It's extremely important to register in every NIGP code in BidBuy that you think you can do business in. Even if there's a slight chance, that will ensure that you get all notifications in your email. Personally, I like to set up a specific email folder in my email for those notifications so that, one, they're not spamming the rest of my email. Two, so I have one place I can quickly run through and see what's out there. Some people or some vendors may have some solicitation gathering tools, but if you don't, this is a quick and easy way to do it. Within those emails, there's a link. There are some very easy other ways to search for solicitations that you may be interested in. So if you go into BidBuy and not logged in as a user, this is the page you're loaded on before you get logged in. If you know your specific bid solicitation, so let's say the one we're going to be looking at today is B2089. We can use the drop-down menu and say we want to look at bid solicitations, and we know the number 12089. Hit the search button, and it'll come up for us. Let's say we didn't know the bid solicitations, and we wanted to look at all bid solicitations. So we can click the Advanced button here. It will take us to this document type screen. And then we would say we were looking for bid solicitations. These are where all your opportunities are. It will bring up to this screen. So it asks us a bunch of different questions. Again, if you know your bid solicitation number, you can enter it here. Alternate ID, you're probably never going to know. If you're looking for maybe a specific type of bid, you're very in tune with doing case management systems. I don't know if it'll return anything, but we can say we can just look for case management. And then it would show us bids for case management, and it would show us when those bids were due. So if I look for case management right now, there's no bids that are active because all the bid opening dates have passed. Item description you probably wouldn't use if you want to look for specific agency. If you're only interested in doing business with the Department of Innovation and Technology, because you're an IT firm, you can click on Department of Innovation and Technology and search for any of their active bids. You can do bid opening date by clicking these little arrows up and down. If you click it twice, it'll give you the things that open the latest. So 4/22/26, this is the one we're looking at in here. The rest of these are all made up things in this environment, but you can look at any of these things. If you want to look at everybody's and you are interested in doing it by NIGP code, so let's say you are an applications company, you write applications. And you can come down here and search for the NIGP codes that you are either registered in or wish to be registered in. Computer software for microcomputers is where most applications live. So you can either do a wide view of every code under there, or you can drill it down to specific types of things. So if you want to look at accounting or financial systems, agricultural systems, aviation, barcodes, whatever it may be. A very common one used in most IT landscapes are application software not otherwise classified. There's usually a larger vendor pool in this code. So if you want to look at everything that's in 20811, it can give you the same list of everything that's available and when that bid opening date is. So you can see the one that we're going to look at today, which is the RFP JPMC Squirrel Wrangling Database. You can look at the IFB that we looked at in the previous session. So it'll bring up everything. But for our case today, we know what we want to look at. We want to look at 12089. If you click on the link out of your email, or if you click on the search function here, this is the landing page. So this is the summary page of the solicitation. On this page, you'll get some important information. First off, the bid number. We know what that is, but it's here again. The short description. So this is a quick description on what the state's looking for. We've talked about this previously, but anything that's prefaced with JPMC means it's a joint purchase master contract. There's only 4 agencies in the state that are allowed to do joint purchase master contracts. And what a joint purchase master contract means to you as a vendor, it means this is usable by multiple agencies, not just the agency doing the solicitation. So if DeWitt's writing a JPMC, that we may say this contract's available to all governmental units. Governmental units are described in 30 ILCS 525, which is the Joint Purchase Act. What it means at the end of the day, it's a unit of government, right? So it's a state agency, it's a city, a county, village, anything that is collecting taxes, really, at the end of the day somehow. It may say these are available to not-for-profit agencies. Not-for-profit agencies also defined in the same act. You'll find the definition for both of these things also in the RFP or IFB document that you see JPMC in front of. Just to make it quick and easy for you guys, a not-for-profit agency really at the end of the day is something the government's supporting. So these contracts or these solicitations, they could have much more far-reaching effects. So this one's for a squirrel wrangling database, so maybe let's say DeWitt wants one for some reason. Then maybe DNR decides they see the system and they need one. And then the Department of Agriculture decides they need one. They would all be able to utilize this contract off this one proposal that you're submitting. So they could be very large contracts. One thing to make sure is to make sure that your company has the bandwidth to complete the terms of that contract. It's very important. Next thing we're going to find on here is the bid opening date. This is probably one of the most important things to you as a vendor looking at possibly submitting a proposal to the solicitation. This is the last date and time that you may submit your proposal. The state does not accept late proposals. So if you are trying to come into BidBuy and submit a proposal at 10 a.m. and 32 seconds, the system's not going to allow you and your proposal is not going to be reviewed. The state absolutely cannot take a late proposal. So it's very important to, 1, monitor that date, 2, to make sure that you are getting in early and getting your proposal submitted. Do not wait to the last minute. I cannot tell you how many times I've had vendors reach out and say, we had a system issue. We were trying to submit our proposal at 9:58 a.m. and now what can we do? Well, the answer is nothing because it's after 10 a.m. So it's very important to get on early and start those proposals as early as possible. Some of the other information you're going to find in here, who the purchaser is. So this is the person leading the procurement usually. What agency it is. So in this case, we're looking at the Department of Innovation Technology, but it could be Central Management Services. It could be Department of Transportation. It could be any state agency that falls under the Chief Procurement Office of General Services. What department at the agency is doing the procurement? So in this case, it's an application. It's the applications department. This don't necessarily have any bearing on you as the vendor. It's more of an internal process for approvals. Fiscal year. So what state fiscal year are we in? State fiscal year rolls over in June, on June 30. So 7/1 would start fiscal year 27 for the state. So it may not match the calendar year. That's what fiscal year means here. The next big important piece, type code. What kind of solicitation is this? So we've covered small purchases. Very less, not as regulated, a little more loose on what's done. Not quite such a rigid process. We covered invitation for bids. This is the state of Illinois' preferred method, solely based on price. And that's it. Nothing else is taken into account. And now we're looking at request for proposal. Price is a factor, but not the deciding factor. This is where we're going to review your proposals and decide on the quality of the solution you're offering the state. Also, we'll get into it, but it also involves commitment to diversity and some other things. Electronic quote just means you could submit a quote in BidBuy. Required date can be filled in, it might not be filled in. It's It's a kind of an arbitrary number for the state. Available date. This is the date that it was publicly made available. So like I said, this is a fake RFP that I wrote, but I made it available this morning at 9:28 a.m. so we can look at it. I failed to put the info contact in, but the info contact would normally have the purchaser's email address. It's important to make sure you keep that information if you are interested, because this is the only place that you can submit questions to, the info contact from the information in BidBuy. Department of Innovation and Technology, we will not take phone calls to answer questions. All questions are going to have to be submitted in writing. We'll cover that again later, but good to touch on a few times. Bid type, if you're seeing it here, and it's a proposal or opportunity, it's going to be open. That just means people can bid on it. Next important dates here, we got the pre-bid conference. So this is after the solicitation's been published. At the pre-bid conferences, the standard set up for the Department of Innovation and Technology. We go over any of the responsiveness materials, which we'll also cover in this webinar today. These are the items that are, I would call, they're important, but they're more of a housekeeping item, the things you want to make sure that you don't get disqualified for. It'd be really terrible to write this amazing proposal and be disqualified because you didn't submit a standard document. So at the pre-bid conferences, we usually go over which of those standard documents have to be submitted again. We go over any parts of the RFP that we think are important and we want to make sure that you read and double check. We go over the dates, the due dates again for each of the things. We go over the evaluation factors. What we do not do at pre-bid conferences is we do not take live questions. Questions have to be submitted in writing. We don't want to take the risk of hearing a question wrong at a pre-submission conference and not answering your question in the best and most possible or best possible way we can. We want to make sure that each of the vendors have all the information that they are requesting. So by making questions be submitted in writing, that gives us the opportunity to make sure that we give the best possible answer we can. Next item down here is bulletin description. The bulletin description is usually just a little more in depth to the short description. So this one tells you do it in cooperation with the CPOGS, is accepting bids for a joint purchase master contract. Any joint purchase master contract has to be in cooperation with the CPOGS. That is the way the legislation and the rules are written. And then usually what we're doing, you're not going to get a whole lot more information out of the bulletin description. It's really just another basic kind of a tell if this is something you even want to open and read, right? If you have no interest in writing a database for squirrel wrangling, great, you got the email, don't open it, don't click on it, don't move on. If you are interested, you'll get the short description in your email and decide that, hey, I want to check this one out. And then we get into all the documents. So we're going to go through each of these documents and kind of do a quick overview. We'll talk about important sections of the documents. This is kind of a basic structure you would see from the Department of Innovation and Technology. The RFP, the attachments to the RFP, and then the state required documents come after that. So we'll get into those in a second. And then down here, the next section you're going to see are the required quote attachments. So when you go to submit your quote, you've got your proposal, you've got all your documents ready. The system will not let you submit your proposal unless you have attached a document for every one of these. So this is kind of another fail-safe for the state to put in there to ensure that you are hopefully getting all the right documents attached, right? We can't control that you attach the right documents to each one of these files, but by forcing something to be attached, we try to make sure that you guys get all the documents required attached. Because again, we don't want anyone to be non-responsive for simply not attaching a document. And it happens more often than you would think. So By having required quote attachments, you have to submit a vendor disclosure or IPG active vendor disclosure. If you don't attach something to that file, when you go to do your quote, you can't submit your quote. Offer to the state. Offer to the state sounds like it would be your proposal, but it's a 1 or 2 page document that you must fill out. It's a standard document. It's not an offer as we think of it in the private sector world. The technical response. This is your answer to all of the evaluation questions we're asking for. Obviously, if you don't submit this, you're probably not getting scored. So important to make sure that we have that. Commitment to diversity vendor answer form. We'll cover what that is here in a few. BEP utilization plan. We'll cover that when we get to that section 2. Reggie did a great session on the BEP utilization plan a couple months ago. You can find that on our YouTube page. Reggie, you want to throw that link in the chat? I would really appreciate it. Just to the main page with all the videos. The veteran utilization plans also covered in that video. It's the same plan, different metrics. And then this one, we have the experience template. We'll see where that comes in later. There may be some other documents you see here, depending on what the state's asking for. If we were asking for a manufacturer, a reseller to sell us a off-the-shelf system. So if you are selling an XYZ Incorporated database system, we would want a manufacturer's authorization for you to be able to sell us that product if you are not the manufacturer. So that may be another item that you see here. It's really the majority of the standard items you would see. Some agencies may have some other random things here or there, but make sure you are getting something attached to each one of these, and make sure, double check. This is one of the reasons I said make sure you start early. Double check and make sure that you are attaching the right document. Make sure you're following any other instructions. We'll cover some of them, especially when it surrounds pricing. We'll touch on it. We'll go more into pricing later on. Pricing documents have another issue. We will be submitting the quote or the proposal in the next session of this, part 2. And we'll go over what some of those things are, but it's very important to read those instructions. I've seen too many vendors get disqualified for submitting a pricing document and not locking that pricing document down. We'll talk about that when we get in the RFP, but that is very important. The next couple things down here that are important for you would be is this a small business set-aside procurement? We have no marked here. What a small business set-aside procurement means is if you are registered with the Illinois Procurement Gateway as a small business, there are a list of NIGP codes that must go out to small businesses first. There are not very many of those in the IT landscape, but there are some if you're thinking, plumbing, roofing, some of the items that CMS may do. Those things with those NIGP codes, no matter what the solicitation method is, have to go out to small businesses first. We talked about small purchases at the previous webinar, and those go out to small businesses first, no matter what the NIGP code is. So this really, really makes a big difference for those. But like I said, there are a list of NIGP codes that, whether it's an invitation for bid or a request for proposal, if that's the NIGP code the solicitation falls under, those must go to small businesses first. Next thing, very important, is there a BEP, BBP participation goal? Your first clue that there is that there's a BEP and BEP utilization plan in the required quote attachments. Down here, you'll find what that goal percentage is. So the goal percentage on BEP is 7%. The goal percentage on BBP is 1%. We'll quickly talk about kind of how that's calculated when we get to that section of the RFP. And then the last items you're going to see here is the item information. So this is where the pricing is, but you want to read the RFP document before you get here. There may be additional pricing documents on some solicitations, and these may be the prices that we end up rolling up at the end of the day. We won't be looking at a pricing document today, so we'll just assume all the pricing is in BidBuy. at this point. But so this is how the state broke down the different various pricing items. So you can see here, there's implementation activities, several line items for that. Validation, go live, hypercare, and down here I'll tell you exactly how many lines you have to fill in. So there's 78 line items for pricing on this RFP. All page one's implementation. If you get down to page 2, you're looking at support, cloud subscriptions. We'll go into these more later. On the pricing one in RFP presentation number 2, but you'll see this is cloud subscription pricing for year 1, integrations and connections, training and support for super users, training for end users. So these are all the different things that the state needs pricing on once we get the RFP proposal done. And on this one, you'll see as we get to item 17, everything starts, the year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5 activities start over. We'll get more into the pricing later, but that's what that last piece is. So what I want to do now is jump directly into the documents required and what each of these documents are. I personally like to work from the RFP down. So I put the documents, when we put a solicitation out, we try to put the documents in the order we want. I say I would open the RFP document as the very first thing because maybe you want to read it and see if you're even interested in responding to it. Obviously, you only got a basic description in the bulletin description. So when we open this RFP document, save it. Sorry, I got to pull it back up. The documents automatically save to your computer. I ask you to save them somewhere. As soon as you click on them, they don't just open for you. So I save mine to my downloads. I'm just pulling that document back up. So here we are. Every state agency under the Chief Procurement Officer of General Services will be using the same RFP template. So you can expect every solicitation you see in BidBuy should have the same form and format, whether it's doing it, or DHS or DOC. You know, we all would probably be asking for very different things, but the form and format should not change. So let's just go through from the beginning. Obviously, the header's pretty self-explanatory. This is the agency doing the solicitation. This is the solicitation type. We're doing a request for proposal. This is what we're calling the solicitation. And this is the BidBuy number. So this should match obviously at the bid that you're looking at. If it does not, it may be one of the things you want to question the state about. Maybe they attached the wrong document. Shouldn't happen, but it very well could. Section A is always going to be the scope of work. And the scope of work in this instance isn't kind of how we think of it in the IT world, right? We're thinking of a statement of work, a scope of work that we're asking for very specific things. The scope of work on an RFP for the state is more of a high-level overview of what's needed. It is not going to give you all the details in Section A of what you need. Section A is going to give you a brief breakdown. So in this case, we're talking about the Department of Innovation and Technology in coordination with the CPOGS. It's going to establish a joint purchase master contract for the design, development, deployment, and ongoing maintenance of a secure, scalable, cloud-based squirrel wrangling and relocation database that we're going to call SWRD because I don't want to keep saying that. This system is going to serve as a centralized platform supporting all the operational activities related to squirrel capture, relocation, sanctuary management, conflict mitigation, and program reporting. So this very first paragraph on every RFP should just give you a quick breakdown of a little more in depth than the bulletin description of what we're buying, right? If it is a joint purchase master contract, that should be in the very first paragraph on every solicitation so that you know what you're getting into. If it's not a joint purchase master contract, it would say the Department of Innovation and Technology intends to establish a contract for the design. It would take out all this language about the Chief Procurement Office. It would take the language out about a joint purchase master contract. It should still be giving you a breakdown. As you can see, it goes a little further in depth, barely into the next paragraph. The purpose of this SWRD is to provide an integrated, high-quality data system of tracking squirrels, including profiles, allowing the wranglers, equipment, events, relocation sites, incidents, whatever to be captured. The platform must uphold strict standards for data security, operational efficiency, and the dignified and humane handling of wildlife information. That's really all you're getting about the system out of Section A. You might get 2 or 3 paragraphs, maybe 4. They're really just there for you as a vendor to decide if you want to keep reading. So if you want to keep reading, obviously do so. If you read the first 2 paragraphs and this doesn't sound like something you're interested in partnering with the state on, this is where you would stop. Being a joint purchase master contract, this certain one has some other definitions. If it is a joint purchase master contract, this is the section where we should be explaining who can use the contract. So in this case, we're saying do it can use it. We're saying other governmental units. So that means state agencies, cities, counties, whatever they may be, public works, they can use the contract. And then we're also saying qualified not-for-profits as defined in the Joint Purchase Act can use the contract. Something else for you, very important for you to read. This says on an as-needed basis throughout the contract term, right? So that means this solicitation is not winning you any money right away, unless they say there's an MVP or something in here. But this is establishing the contract vehicle for each of the state agencies to come buy something from you. If it was an agency-specific contract, that would not be the case. Most likely, they'd be buying a very specific system. So it's important to read how that works. This doesn't guarantee you an order, but obviously if the state's writing a joint purchase master contract, there's need out there for the system. So there may already be an order that we're thinking about. Sometimes, as do it, if we're writing a JPMC, we'll give you the information for the initial system later on in the RFP. So you can make a very good proposal based on what the initial system is going to look like. But it's important to read when that contract is going to be used. The rest of this language here goes into pretty much stating that each agency is in charge of their own bills, their own issues. So if you get a statement of work done for Department of Transportation, the fiscal obligation is on Department of Transportation. The creditor liability is on the Department of Transportation. Any issues will be resolved between the vendor and that party. As mentioned earlier, the definition for governmental unit and qualified not-for-profit is here. So governmental unit means state of Illinois, any state of agency defined in section 1.15100 of the Procurement Code, office of the state, public authority who has the power of the tax, or any other public entity created by statute. Not-for-profit means you got to qualify under section 4535 of the Illinois Procurement Code. So you're either acting pursuant to a board established by or controlled by a unit of local government, or receives a grant funds from the state or from a local unit of government. So, you're a pseudo part of the government. A2 is the next section of every RFP. It's going to give you the desired outcomes of this project and this engagement. So what are we hoping to achieve by writing the solicitation, you submitting a proposal, and us getting to an executed contract at some point? So, here we're looking at the desired outcome of this procurement. It's going to be a successful implementation of a modern cloud-based squirrel wrangling, relocation, and database system. We want to enhance the operational coordination, improve accuracy, support compliant, humane wildlife management practices across participating agencies. We want to streamline, standardize the process. We want to modernize at the end of the day. This one comes down and tells you that the SWRD should deliver a unified platform that can do these different things. So we want to enable tracking, comprehensive tracking. We want to support efficient scheduling, communication, documentation, provide transparent, reliable data, ensure a high level of security. We want to reduce the manual processes. That's the key to any modernization. So most of the time when you're looking at an IT solicitation, we want to reduce the manual processes. We want to modernize what we're doing. We want to get rid of the duplicative record keeping. We don't want Joe, Bob, and Bill all keeping separate spreadsheets of the same information, doing the same thing. We want that data to be in one place. Without having accurate and holistic data, we cannot make the best decisions for the taxpayers. We want to enhance interagency collaboration by providing a shared standard database system for use by DoIT and other governmental units. So this would be why DoIT may be writing a JPMC for this. Maybe we want an enterprise solution for all agencies that have the need of something similar, right? So I think I mentioned earlier, it could be for DNR, it could be the Department of Ag, it could be for DoIT. We want one collaborative system where we can pull our data. And then at the end, ultimately, our desired outcomes, we want a durable, long-lasting, user-friendly system that supports sustainability, efficiency, and integrity. The next section of every RFP is going to be the schedule. Pretty self-explanatory. This is a standard schedule for the Department of Innovation and Technology. So the below schedules are always tentative, right? There's some hard dates in here sometimes, but it's tentative, especially once you get to after the bid opening date. The pre-submission conference, question due date, and the bid opening date, you'll be notified if any of those actually change from what's posted in BidBuy. But the rest of these dates, when we're talking about evaluation period, oral presentations or demonstrations, anticipated vendor negotiation timing, anticipation of award, those are all tentative dates. They can change based on the complexity of proposals. They can change on the number of proposals received. I've seen RFPs at the state get 2 proposals. I've seen RFPs at the state get 22 proposals, right? Not something we control. So that changes the evaluation period drastically. It can change the demonstration or oral presentation period drastically. It can change the question and answer period drastically. You know, if we get submitted, submission deadlines 2 weeks after posting, we get 5 questions. The state can answer 5 questions on time and quickly. If we get 852 questions, we're probably not getting done in a week. And we will, if we have to push out the deadline to get your questions answered, the state would look at pushing out the submission deadline too, based on how long it takes us to answer those questions. So that could blow up the entire schedule. Hence why everything's tentative at that point. Next section of the contract is the term. Obviously very important for you to read. This tells you how long the contract's going to be active. It will tell you if there's any renewals. So this current one says it's going to have an initial term commencing upon the last dated signature of the parties. So that means when we execute the contract on both the vendor and the state side, ending 5 years later. So you got a 60-month, 5-year contract. This will be in every single contract. This is part of the legislation that says the state cannot enter into a contract that exceeds 10 years. Next very important part is the vendor's not going to commence any billable work of the contract prior to the execution of the contract. So if we don't have a signed contract, that shouldn't be working because you can't be paid for it. We can't pay you outside of a contract term. Section 4.2 is renewal. So if there are renewals, this section will be in the solicitation. If there are not renewals, there will be none. This will be marked NA. So we went ahead and did a renewal on this one. So we look at renewing. We have renewals for up to 5 years. The state reserves the right to renew on one renewal covering all 5 years. Individual 1-year renewals, combination of those. However, that agency is looking at renewing should be defined right here. Some agencies might use dates. Some agencies might say we'll only renew in 1-year increments. So it's important to look at the renewal section. These things are not negotiable on a contract. The term of the contract cannot change. The renewal years do not change. Now, renewals have to be agreed on by both the agency and the vendor. So you do have some power there as the vendor to say, no, I don't want to renew this contract. But what's going to be written into the original contract cannot change. It tells you how the pricing for the renewal is going to be figured out. So it says the renewal terms or the formula for determining the prices in the pricing section of the solicitation. So if you want to look at the price for your renewals, go to the pricing section. Then it tells you any renewal is subject to the same terms and conditions that apply to the initial term of the contract unless otherwise provided. This is standard language. It's going to be in every contract. Now, section B is where we really start getting into items we can do. I apparently didn't delete that comment. Great. So section B is where you're going to get into the various current conditions. So overview and background. So this is going to be a in-depth look of where we're at now. So currently, these functions are managed through a combination of a Microsoft Access database and multiple Excel spreadsheets maintained by various program staff. So this is telling you, this section should always be telling you what situation the state's in now, right? So next sentence, we've used these tools and have supported our operations to date, but they have limitations, scalability, data integrity issues, reporting accuracy issues. Multi-users can't access the same thing, and it's not a good long-term solution. This section is going to tell you, or look in this one, for example, where you have 10,000 records related to Squirrel. So this section should be telling you as a vendor what kind of data is there currently, what systems it's in currently, and what you're potentially going to have to look at migrating into your solution if that's part of the RFP. More often than not, the migration is going to be part of the RFP, so this information is going to be applicable to your proposals. So this one conveniently tells you that these records must be migrated into accurately, securely, and with minimal disruption into the new system. It's going to tell you that we need a successful transition. We need testing environments, processes. We want a sandbox. You know, there's UAT testing that we're going to require, any additional staging or quality assurance. The point of overview and background is to tell you where we're at and where we want to go. You'll obviously get more information later on as we're talking about the proposal criteria, the evaluation criteria. But section B is for us to tell you our current state and what we're looking for in a future state. Section B2's volumes and quantities. So how many records do we have currently? How much data do we currently have? Right, so 10,000 records in a Microsoft Access or a Excel sheet isn't going to be very much data space, right? So it might only be 100 megabytes of data. You know, the complexity and the challenge there as a vendor would be pulling the data from multiple sources and making sure your system actually had the capabilities to pull data from multiple sources, depending on what those source types are. There are some additional sections that may be in here that are on the standard template. It's not one that I use very often, but there's a section called unique considerations that may be on a standard RFP template. This is anything the agency thinks is unique to this solicitation versus a normal solicitation. So that may be on there. Some agencies may give you the budget in another section right here. If they have a set budget, being a joint purchase master contract, you're never going to see a budget because there is no budget. It's for everybody to use. But if I was writing this for a specific agency, maybe that agency only had $2 million to spend on this system or $500,000, right? The point of an agency giving you the budget is for you to decide as the vendor what bells and whistles that you can offer in that price point, or if you can even offer a solution in their price point. The next section we have here is figures and diagrams, reference documents. So these should be items that the state is giving you to tell you information about maybe the current system, maybe information about how we want the future system to flow. The items in here is any other additional documents, figure diagrams, or that we think could help you in writing a proposal that meets the state's needs. So, and here I just threw in some random stuff that made sense for this current system, current flow intake and scheduling, data entry, reconciliation, reporting. Key improvements, so what we want you to solve with your new system, and then what minimum acceptable incidents. So these are outage incidents, UAT defect resolutions. So if there's something wrong with the system, what is the timeframes to fix these things? Again, not negotiable. These are what we're saying are going to be the limits. Section C, you need to read through the entire thing, but let's glean through here to see what documents. So C1's, what documents do you need? So vendor disclosures. So we're going back to those required document sections. Technical response offered to the state for information and technology. Commitment to diversity. pricing, BEP utilization plan, VPP plan. These are the documents required for this bid. These are our standard documents required for whatever bid we're looking at. You can find further information about where the documents are in this section. It tells you some information about entering pricing. I think I talked about this earlier. If you enter pricing information into the alternate description of BidBuy, it could result in a disqualification. So don't be putting any pricing information anywhere besides the pricing line. Another very important thing to point out in this section, some of this is just quick instructions on how to do it to BidBuy. I want to point out the very important things for you to look at. So the attachments tab, this is where I see issues constantly. If you include a supplemental pricing document or the state asks you to fill out a pricing document and you do not check the box that says this attachment contains any pricing, cost, or discount information, that's grounds for automatically making you disqualified as a non-responsive vendor. Pricing has to stay separate. State employees cannot see the pricing until after the technical proposals have been evaluated for the quality of the proposal. If they can see any pricing before then, you're going to get yourself disqualified. So don't make sure there's no pricing anywhere in your technical proposal, and make sure you lock any pricing documents. C2 just tells you to refer to BidBuy for the due date and time we've already looked at. C3, C4 you can read. C5 says go to BidBuy to get your information contact. So this is where you get the email address. C6 and C7 are important times for you to look at. Offer questions and agency responses. So when our questions due, in this case we say 2 weeks after publishing. It could be a hard date. Depends on what the agency wants to put in there. Pre-submission conference. So if you remember, the BidBuy file said refer to section C.7 for information about the pre-submission conference. You should have WebEx date, time, and link info at this section. C8 you can read. It's about small business set aside. That's not applicable to this procurement. C9 we talked about BEP and VBP. C9 and C10. This is where the goals are, along with the NIGP codes used to calculate those goals. If you are a self-performing vendor, you have to be registered in all the NIGP codes on the solicitation. If you are going to subcontract out any of the BEP work to a subcontractor, they must be registered in one of these two codes. If they're not registered in one of these two codes, you cannot use them to fulfill your BEP goal. BEP goals are figured out by taking the number of vendors registered in each of the NIGP codes applicable to the solicitation. So in this case, 208-11, 918-71, and the number of vendors registered in BidBuy to do business under those two NIGP codes. And it's a quick mathematical solution. We take the number of vendors registered under the CEI database as BEP vendors in the codes, divided by the number of vendors registered under that same code in BidBuy, and you get a percentage. That percentage is multiplied by the scope, gives us the goal. So if 90% of the scope is going to be an application, it's going to have more weight than the consulting piece of the scope. And that's going to change from solicitation to solicitation. The veterans goals figured out the same exact way. Different pool of vendors must be registered as a veterans vendor with CEI, another database, but figured out the same way. Same calculation, same codes, nothing can differ between the two. Besides the percentage, because the amount of vendors in the pool of registered vendors is going to change. C11 would tell you if there's a security bid performance bond. 9 times out of 10 I do it, you're not going to see anything there. C12 is telling you where the terms and conditions for the resulting contract will be. So C12 could be information and technology standard and terms and conditions. So these are for any IT procurements for the state, or it may just say standard terms and conditions. It's going to link you to the website to pull those. It's just taking you to the CPO's website, and then you have to come down here to the forms and find the terms and conditions. They're in the vendor forms section. So here's standard terms and conditions. Here's information and technology terms and conditions. They're similar, but they are very different at the same time. We'll look at that kind of stuff when we get to section 3 or webinar 3 when we're looking at contracting. Evaluation process. So this tells you the basic process of evaluation. There's nothing real important for you to look at applicable to the specific solicitation here. This is a cookie cutter clause. Same with D2. This is cookie cutter clause. So this is going to be in every single RFP you find. evaluation methodology. This is where you're going to start looking at what's applicable to this solicitation. So the technical requirements are described in F2, F3, and F5. We'll get down there when we get to F. But the next important, here's the total number of points for technical requirements. This solicitation has 1,000. Technical requirements means both the proposed technical solution, so the technical proposal that you write, and the demonstration for the state. So that's together, we break that down in the next section, what makes up the technical requirements. Well, 800 goes to the proposed technical solution and 200 go to the demonstration. Commitment to diversity, this is going to be the same words in every single procurement. It's telling you that commitment to diversity points are always going to be 20% of the technical requirement points. So if it's 1,000 points, I like to do it. We like to try to use the same value each time, so it's the same every time. But 20% of the points, so it's going to commitment to diversity is going to be 200 because there's 1,000 technical. And then it gives you the categories for commitment to diversity. We can get further into those later. We may actually just cover commitment to diversity altogether on the next webinar. I think that probably takes some talking about. D5 is important. So these are minimum required points. D5 is going to tell you what it takes, how many points you have to receive of the evaluations to move on. Maybe there's not all agencies use a minimum required points. I like using a minimum required point, so do it. We'll always use one, but it could change. This is pretty standard for us. The top 3 offers score a minimum of 70% of the points of the technical and commitment to diversity. So that means you got to score 70% of the 1,200 points, 1,000 for technical, 200 for commitment to diversity. And we tell you that's 700 points here to be eligible to move on to demonstrations. Demonstrations will be the next piece. That's obviously worth another 200 points. Sorry, and I misspoke. It's 70% of the technical proposal and the commitment to diversity. So it's 800 plus 200. So it's 1,000 total points to move on. And you got to get 700 of those to move on to the demonstrations. The demonstrations are the last 200 points. And then it tells you if only 1 or 2 offers meet the 70%, those corresponding number of offers will be the only ones to move on to demonstrations. So if only one person hits 70%, only one person is going to make it to demonstration and have a potential chance to win that contract. If 2 people make it, 2 people will. If there's 5, only 3 people is going to make it because we said only the top 3. And then we tell you if nobody meets the 70% minimum, the state reserves the right to allow the top 3 scored offers to demonstrations. So everyone scores 60%. In the 60s, we have 61, 62, 63, 64, 65. The state reserves the right to pull those highest 3 ranked ones still. And this could be for many reasons. Maybe we have a critical need and redoing the solicitation may not be feasible at that point. So it's just or it maybe the evaluation criteria could have been better. And so it just depends. Price, the state tells you the things I told you about the price. State only opens price after technical and commitment. That means technical proposal. That means demonstration and commitment to diversity evaluations. Then down here in this section, you're going to find out how many points we're giving to price. So that's telling you how sensitive the state is to the price of the solution that you're offering. So in this case, the state's using 240 points, which is 20% of the total points available for the entire solicitation. So price is fairly important. If it was 5%, that tells you that the state's not as price sensitive. If the number here was 600 points, right, then that means the state's extremely price sensitive, but still wants to be able to evaluate some of the quality. Good standard deduction or standard number is the state shouldn't be using over 35%. Do it will not use over 35% unless it's only for licensing or a very licensing type of RFP. So most likely you should see between the 20 and 35% range on an RFP with the state. Maximum available points, that's just giving you the total points allowed. So 1,000 for technical and demonstrations, that I apparently spelled wrong, 200 for commitment to diversity, and 240 for price. So the total points available for this solution is 1,440 points. Section E, I am not going to read any of. Section E is all cookie cutter clauses. You should read them as the vendor to make sure you understand them, but they have no bearing on the distinct solution that we're asking for. Section F is really where you start getting into what, as the vendor, you need to do. So section F.1, contract requirements. These are clauses that are going to go directly into the contract. They're there for informational purposes for you. These are going into the contract. They'll be in the contract. You have nothing to do besides acknowledge. You don't even have to acknowledge. We're telling you that by bidding on this contract, you're acknowledging that you're going to meet these contract requirements. So solution must be hosted in an offer maintained cloud. You know, we want a web-based solution with access 24/7. I'm not going to go through them all. You must agree to attachment A, do it cloud hosting appendix. It's going to be part of the contract. If you propose any changes, they must submit it at the time of your proposal. The solution is going to be built with information security from inception rather than try to figure it out afterwards. So whatever these they're going to change from solicitation to solicitation. But these are the things that are not negotiable to you as the vendor. There are things that are going to go in the contract. By bidding on this contract, you are agreeing to these things already. And then we get into section F.2, mandatory requirements with evidence. So these are also things that are going to go directly into the contract. You cannot negotiate these, but the state's asking for some kind of supporting evidence, right? So you must have experience hosting and providing maintenance and support of the proposed solution for at least 2 government customers. So maybe the piece of evidence you're giving us there is, it could be the contract for those 2 customers. It could be affidavit from those 2 customers saying that you have your solution in place here. Anything that shows that you can meet that requirement. Offers project manager must have at least 2 years of experience leading the implementation of a similar system, right? Could be your all project manager's resume. High level work plan, how you can go live in 12 months. So I'm not going to go through all these, but you would have to write something in your proposal showing that you can meet all of these, or submit a document showing that you can meet all of these. And then you need to click the met box showing that you can meet these. If you cannot meet one of the mandatory requirements with evidence, you're ineligible to move on to technical proposals. So if you say, I can't meet F2.4, the state's not going to look at the rest of your proposal. So if you have questions over those, it's very important to submit those questions during the Q&A. F.3, this is the bread and butter of the RFP, right? The proposed technical solution. So this is where all the scoring is going to happen. And we'll go over how to best respond to these in form and format in the next one. But when you're looking at these, here's the question the state wants answered. And here's how many points are given to that question. This one, I did the same points for almost every question, but this will also, this section lets you know how important the aspect is to the state, right? If this one's going to have 50, if number 1 has 50 points and number 2 has 10 points, obviously the 50-point aspect is much more important in the solution to the state than the 10-point aspect. So it's important to look at the point value of each of these. That shows you the importance to that product or that particular thing to the state. It's important to read these all the way through and make sure that you answer each and every one of them, every part of it. And it's important to put the proposal section in the page number that it's in. This is going to help you. We'll talk about why this helps you later on in the next session, since we're running out of time anyway. And then you need to look at the number of desirables, right? So if you look at this one, here's all the points. We won't go through the desirables because those change from solution to solution. But you can see if I scroll down to, and I keep looking at section F3, I'm asking you to answer 42 different specific questions. Some of those may involve an attachment. So it's very important to read them all the way through. Give us what we're asking for. A lot of times I'll give you examples of things I need you to include in your answer. So make sure they're included. It's how you score the best. From it to diversity, I think we'll go into a little more on the next one. It's got the guidance on how to answer those things. It's the same questions for every single solicitation for the state. So you're going to answer every solicitation the same way, but we'll go over what those are. Demonstrations, same thing here. This is exactly what we're going to have you show. It's telling you that we're going to email you, give you 2 weeks advance notice. And we're going to limit your time to 120 minutes. And we want you to show these 10 things, and this is the point value of each of those 10 things. These are the only things you can show in a demonstration. This only things they're going to score in the demonstration. If you show them something else, the evaluators are going to ignore it and only grade you on exactly what we asked for here. And then the final big section, because I know I'm a minute over, the format of pricing. This is telling you where to put the pricing in. So this one says, put your pricing in the items tab of BidBuy. It could say, enter your pricing in a pricing sheet that provided by the state, called attachment E. So it could say multiple things. And then down here, I like to put a reiteration of if you're going to attach any pricing document, please make sure you mark the appropriate boxes, because we do not want to have to disqualify you for leaving a pricing document viewable. We'll look at the pricing stuff in session 2. Type of pricing tells you if it's a firm or estimated. So JPMCs are always going to be estimated. Tells you if expenses are allowed. Tells you how taxes are handled. Renewal compensation. So this is going to tell you, and we're going to talk about pricing in the next thing. So we'll get further into section F.5.6 at session 2 and how each of these things work. And then the very last section of every RFP should be the attachments that are applicable to that solicitation. So in this instance, there's 4 attachments. There's the cloud hosting appendix, which is part of the mandatories. There's the service level agreements, which are part of the mandatories. There's the state security requirements, which were part of the mandatories. Attachment B, the experience template, was in the very first section of F.3, and this is the template we expect you to answer the first 2 desirable questions on. So whatever attachments, exhibits the state are providing you to make sure you answer the proposal completely and holistically will be found in this section. It looks like we're 2 minutes over. We'll wrap session 1 here, and I'll take any questions. Session 2, we'll get into the pricing of the section. We'll get into the commitment to diversity of the section, and we'll get into actually answering the proposals and filling out the documents. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if I have any questions I need to address here.
I have one for you, Chris. It came in privately, so you might not see it. Will you share the 4 agencies allowed to initiate JPMCs?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 4 agencies at the state of Illinois under the CPOGS that can initiate a joint purchase master contract is the Department of Central Management Services. So they would be able to initiate contracts for things that are not IT. The Department of Innovation and Technology, we can initiate joint purchase master contracts for items that are IT. The Illinois State Board of Education can write them for the school district specifically. And then the Chief Procurement Office of General Services, which is our independent oversight body over each of those agencies, they can also enter into joint purchase master contracts. Those are the only 4 agencies that may do so, unless they get a special delegation from one of those agencies, which is, I can't say that I've ever seen in the time I've been at the state. So.
And that's the only questions right now that we have in chat.
Awesome. Is there any other questions? I give my little wrap-up speech here. No, don't look like it. Awesome. So part 2 of this series is happening next month. As we mentioned, part 2 is going to cover commitment to diversity sheets. It's going to cover pricing sections, and it's going to cover best practices on how to respond to a state solicitation. We'll cover just a few documents that we didn't get to today, which include the offer to the state, vendor disclosures, which are, we'll point out to where you can find some help on that from one of our previously recorded sessions. The U plan, which you can find some help on one of our previously recorded sessions. So session 2, we're going to go through responding to an RFP. We hope you join us for session 2. If you have any questions after this, please get those in and we will respond on the next webinar. I will kick it back over to Reggie.
Well, thank you, Chris, for helping us break down the structures of requests for proposals and for showing how vendors can better understand evaluation criteria and compliance requirements before starting the proposal process. Today's session's focused on how to interpret and navigate an RFP, which is the first critical step in competing for larger and more complex state contracting opportunities. As we continue the Mastering State Contracting Game series, our next session will build directly on what we covered today. Part 4, Building a Winning Proposal, RFP Part 2, will take place on April 15th from 10 to 11 a.m. Central Time. In that session, we'll move from understanding the RFP to developing a strong response, including crafting effective technical narratives, writing clear statements of work, and assembling supporting documentation that helps avoid common submission errors. Be on the lookout for registration details. They'll be opening soon. Now, before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone about another opportunity to connect with us. On March 25th, 2026, from 10 to 11 a.m., we'll be hosting our second quarterly office hours session, providing vendors with direct access to procurement experts for questions about state contracting, BEP certification, compliance requirements, and business development opportunities with DoIT. These open office hours are designed to be an interactive space where you can bring your questions and get guidance directly from the team. I'm Reginald Lampkin, and on behalf of the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology's Office of Supplier Diversity and the IT Procurement Office, thank you for joining us today and for your continued participation in the Mastering the State Contracting Game series. We look forward to seeing you at office hours on March 25th and again for part 4 of the series in April. Have a great rest of your day.